Hi students, Professor Laney again. We are here today to do chapter 4. This is a big one, and I guess I've said that with all the chapters so far. But this one it really talks about the IEP, and so I'm going to start off with letting you know that I have a lot of professor information on this, but I also have a lot of mom information on this. And so I may switch hats half and half on the way in and out of this chapter. So I'm trying to keep it balanced for those future teachers, but I also know that there's some parents who take this class who might have questions about this as well. So I can't do everything that I want to hit in terms of empowering parents. That's a whole nother class, 207. You are welcome to take 207 with me. Just started this semester, and it looks like we're having some really good responses, so we should be able to teach it every semester. So again, let's get to it. Chapter 4, Individual Program Plans and Special Services, starts on page 80. And of course, it's part of Unit 1, and we've already done Chapter 1, 2. Remember, thinking about exceptionalities, what our bias is, supporting all learners, and culturally and linguistically diverse students. This is no different. This is really talking about how to take all those things and put it together and make a plan. Now, again, this can get extremely detailed, so I'm going to try to keep it as understandable as possible. And again, for those of you who are going on in your education and going to be a special ed teacher, you will get a lot even more in depth than this. So again, this is an intro class. We are really just talking about some of the intro concepts here. There's a lot more to know, and I do have a lot more tips and tricks, especially when it comes to talking about behaviors and goal settings, but we might not get to all that today. Okay, so let's hit it. So again, we've talked about how some students are identified at birth or even before. We can find prenatally if there are students who are going to need some supports. But a lot of times kids aren't identified until they get into school. Now, in previous incarnations of this book that we really talked about when kids are little, you'll see maybe a speech delay, right? Because you're not doing learning. I mean, it's ABCs and sorry, I have it right here. ABCs and colors and shapes and that kinds of things in preschool, but you won't see a dyslexia. You won't see a learning disability, things like that. You'll see behavioral stuff. You may see a language delay, but not until kids get older will you see dyslexia, a specific learning disability, anything that has to do with that. So again, some kids are really identified very, very early, and some kids it takes usually second grade is usually a big time where a lot of parents get that referral home. And so we'll talk about that as well. Just know that the IEP is the blueprint. Okay, it's a blueprint. When kids are younger, it's an IFSP. So it's really looking at all the family and looking at a big foundational plan, and then once they hit an academic environment, usually K through 12, then it's an IEP. Okay, so I do like this here. The book talks about Laderick Horn, and he is featured in several places in the book, but he actually does a spoken word, which is really kind of cool, and so I want to share this with you. And we'll talk about what makes a good teacher too, about looking at student strengths. And even this IEP as a federal document will include student strengths, because a student can't be all bad and all disabled and all behind, right? Okay. So the first part is individually determined education. And literally, I have never seen an IEP that looks the same, not even close. And again, the overall purpose of the IEP is to really get, again, a roadmap or a blueprint and also outline the appropriate services, because not every student will qualify, and not every student needs the exact same things. Okay, so we'll talk about all these different things. So if you look at it like this, like, there's kids who are all trying to get the same goal. And not every kid is going to be able to get the same goal. Now, we're not cheating, we're not cutting corners, we're not making it easier. But what we're doing over here is we're just creating equal opportunities. We're really evening the playing field so everybody has access. Now, if one of these kids just doesn't want to reach up and grab the apple, that's totally different. But again, the schools are to provide those supports, literally, like you see here. Okay? And never, ever, ever, ever forget the I means individual. It means a person. This is not just a black and white document. This is a living, breathing, workable blueprint for a human being, okay? And again, it's sometimes administrators, when they get really burned out, you'll see a lot of forgetting that we're here for students, again. And, some students are going to need different types of supports, more intense supports, and they may need a larger team. Some kids just need a few accommodations or modifications. And so we'll talk about all those different areas in this chapter. Okay, now again, we could check universal screenings when kids are little. We usually figure out if they have a hearing impairment or challenge or a vision impairment or challenge, and we can work with that. But universal screenings is where we find out academically where some students just aren't cutting it, and maybe they need a little bit more supports. And remember, this is part of the RTI process, response to intervention. If all those situations have not helped, first tier, second tier, third tier interventions, then this kid needs more. Okay, and it's okay. Now, child find is almost like, I don't even really think the term is accurate enough. It's almost like it's like a magnet, really. I mean, a child find can be prompted by any professional or even a parent. So in our case, Peyton was identified early, but we didn't know what kind of supports he would need in school, so we went straight to the district and said, our child has been identified with special needs. How do we get the ball rolling? He was about 3 when we started it, because we knew, at birth, he was 6 weeks early, so he was in the hospital. I'm sorry, he was 10 weeks early, and he was in the hospital for 6 weeks. So 3 pounds, we knew something was there was going to be some challenges there, and lo and behold, there were. So when we went to the district, they helped us. They started that way. Okay. Now again, the IEP means Individualized Education Plan or Program, right? And it's just a tool, okay? And the process is 7 steps, lucky number 7, right? Okay. So there's a pre-referral. Again, it could be started from the parents, it could be started from the teacher, but we're really just figuring out that this student needs extra supports. And then the referral process, obviously, you have to go through this full assessment. Basically, when I say assessment professionals here, it could be a psychologist. There's also, they first see an audiologist and a nurse. We want to make sure if a child just can't see the board, you can't get mad at them for not reading. We get a tool. Now, giving them a tool and then they can see the board, that doesn't mean that they're going to qualify for an IEP. They just need this tool, right? And maybe an accommodation would be moving that child towards the front of the classroom. Done. Doesn't need an IEP. Just a 504 with a list of accommodations sometimes does the trick. The assessment is, again, part of the whole situation. And again, this is all done with parents' permission. I do have times in situations where parents will not agree to these things. And so that's a whole other issue. Again, take 207 and we'll talk about that. Okay. And then eligibility. Well, does this child meet the criteria? Are they actually eligible? And we talked about really looking at these test results plus those cultural factors. Are we saying that a child has a language delay or they have a language difference? Right? A language delay might have some cognitive challenges there, but a language difference just means they might be used to a different language, right? Now, development is really looking at all the different pieces and the parts and creating what exactly that student needs. Again, if that student just needs glasses and to sit by the front, great. If that student needs a hearing device where I wear a hearing device and they can hear me better, great. If that child needs PT, OT, a therapist, counseling, intervention, then we get those players and those parts of that puzzle together, okay? Now, implementation, they'll tell you, when is this going to take place? When are we going to start this? And again, there's some very specific timelines that has to do with federal government and things like that. So as you go further, you'll learn about these certain things. And then evaluation and reviews. That means you can't keep doing something if it doesn't work, right? Again, we have to have database practices. We have to have proof that things works. And so I also included a couple of diagrams here. Again, they have the steps a little bit different, but we would start with a pre-referral, which sometimes people put together, assessment, eligibility, and development. And then look at this. We review annually. We monitor we do implementation. We monitor the progress. We review annually. You do this one, 5, 6, and 7. You do this annually. So once a year, the team checks in and says, hey, what's up? What's going on? Is this working? Is this not working? Right? And I haven't heard from my school yet. So for me, it's mid-September. And so we'll see. We're getting him used to the 4th grade, so we'll see. So you do this annually, and then tri-annually, you do this every 3 years. Again, some kids are no longer eligible, meaning their language delay picked up, they are meeting all the requirements, so sometimes the IEP is just a temporary thing and just goes away. Some parents are worried that it's going to be like a tattoo on their forehead or something, and it's not. So again, some kids don't qualify after the first triennial. I also included a trail map for parents. FYI, if you download this entire Prezi as a portable Prezi, that zipped file that I put in there, you can have access to all of these graphics. And so if you want to share things like this, please do. Again, take 207 with me. We'll talk about how to approach parents. It's all about the approach. But this entire process can be extremely daunting for you as a student, for professionals, for parents, of course. And then later we invite the students in. So again, trying to make things easy, trying to make things understandable, trying to make things less intimidating is really a huge part of that, okay? And then also teachers can't be left out. But again, be at the meeting on time, take notes, speak up. I've had some teachers really speak up for my son, and I think that was great, especially when we talk about emotionally disturbed. It's a terrible term, and it's not even a doctor term. It's a school term. And so when I got this assessment of the school, and they told me he's in 3 different categories, ADHD, which is OHI, we'll talk about that later, autism, and emotionally disturbed, I took that to the doctor, and I said, what do you think about that? She says, I don't think about emotionally disturbed, because that's a school term, not a doctor term. And in fact, the teacher sat at the IEP meeting next to me and said, I don't ever want to hear that term associated with this child. He is not emotionally disturbed. He has emotions, but he is not disturbed, and there's no problems with him. And I was like, oh, thank you. And by the way, legally, totally protected. Totally 100,000,000% protected for a teacher to advocate for a child. I'm getting the chilly willies just talking about it. It was so powerful. And so I love when teachers really get in there and advocate for their children, because sometimes that parent-teacher relationship can be very adversarial. And when I have teachers who are just on board, it makes all the difference in the world. And guess what? They have an awesome year. The year previous to that, his teacher was like this the whole time. Well, he doesn't listen. I'm like, he has executive functioning disorder and auditory processing disorder, so of course he doesn't listen. His brain makes it very difficult for him to listen. That's his major challenge. She also suspended him 3 times illegally, and we'll talk about that as well. So having the right teacher, advocating for your child who knows who your child actually is, knows the laws, and knows what they can do, makes all the difference in the world. Trust me, I could sue the school district and retire after that. So it's been kind of a process for me. So again, hopefully your process, or the process as a teacher or a parent, is going to be much easier. And later we'll talk a little bit more about education and law. Again, all students with disabilities, when it comes to inclusion, well, let's go back. FAPE, LRE, and inclusive education. Again, all students, we talked about FAPE and LRE, we'll review it again. All students with disabilities are entitled to free, appropriate public education. And in order to make that happen, we have to really talk about that LRE, that least restrictive environment. But there's many different environments that can be least restrictive, but again, depends on what the student needs. Just as a review, IDEA balances out LRE and FAPE. Okay, know what both of those acronyms are, and I put an acronym whole study set on Quizlet. And inclusion is not simply about physical proximity. Don't just put them near typical kids. It's about intentionally planning for the success of all students. Think inclusive.us. I love it. And again, there are some exceptions, because if you have a student who's deaf and their parents are deaf and they're going to sign, and their whole community and their whole family, putting them in a gen ed classroom where people don't sign may not be the best, least restrictive environment. That's actually remarkably restrictive when nobody speaks their language. So sometimes putting them in a special school where it's just deaf kids, and then same thing with kids who are vision impaired. But I have a kid at our school who she walks with a cane, and she has another friend who walks her home. I mean, they're both like 8 years old, 9 years old. Sometimes I kind of follow them home a little bit because they're kind of on our way, but it's really amazing to see what kids can do when they're put into an environment where they are understood, supported, and encouraged. Okay, and again, we'll talk about specialized support and all the combination of services. There's lots. Okay, you remember what LRE is, FAPE, and inclusive education, and make sure you know what all these terms are. I thought that was cute. I don't always agree with the district's offer of FAPE, but when I do, it's because the team's recommendation for placement was the least restrictive environment. Always. Okay? Trust me, I've had the team come back to me and say, well, we need to put him in another school. I'm like, no, that's not the least restrictive environment. That's the most restrictive environment. And of course, he stayed. Okay. Now, pull-in programming means that sometimes you'll have a speech teacher on the side of the room with like 3 or 4 kids, because it's not just one kid. It can be a lot of kids. And remember, we talked about speech and language is one of the first impairments, but then learning disabilities is one of the largest ones. So you'll see pull-in programming and then pull out, like push in or pull in and then pull out, right? And when a student has to go to a counselor or something like that, right? You've seen the difference in class and outside of class. And collaboration is really a term where you have teachers helping each other out in order to best help the student. Sometimes there's 2 teachers. There's a gen ed teacher and a special ed teacher. Especially in full inclusion, we're getting a lot more creative in our staffing and our roles. And consulting teachers would be maybe somebody who is a special ed teacher who can consult with a gen ed teacher who has a couple of different students in their class. Again, it depends on who's at the school, right? And I know this is a little bit hard to see, but if you look at the most specialized, but the least over here is the least separate, meaning gen ed only, 100% gen ed. My child is 100% gen ed. He's been like that since kindergarten. Preschool, he was in an SDC preschool, which is a special day class, okay? But he's here, again. If he was had some co-teaching, that would still be here in the gen ed class. Itinerant means that it's one specific teacher and a resource teacher. It kind of means they might start off with like homeroom 20% of the day and then 80% being here, okay? And then self-contained means it's usually mod severe. Kids that cannot really mingle here do well. They're disruptive, or they hurt themselves, or they can't keep up, so we keep them in a very rare case now. And full inclusion means everybody everywhere, but every once in a while there's just a little set of students who need self-contained special class. And the special day school, same thing, it's more specialized. And then homebound or hospital instructions for students who are maybe really, really medically fragile. And it does happen. And by the way, the districts can provide some teaching in hospitals. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, okay? And then residential school is for students who have a very high level of specialized supports that cannot be helped in any of these other situations here. Okay, great. Good. So again, let's keep in mind the individual as we go towards services and settings. And now each student has that specific plan. And again, who's on that team really makes a difference on what that student needs. Sometimes they need lots, and sometimes they just need one little thing, okay? And again, it's really all depending on that one student. There is no template. There's no like, oh, well, that child has dyslexia, so we'll give them this. That we give them X, Y, and Z. Oh, that child right there has autism, so let's give them X, Y, Z. Every student is different. I like to say, if you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. They're so different, okay? And again, if a student is really medically fragile, the doctor makes those. The doctor makes those determinations, and IDEA is really, again, for the classroom setting, right? There are no costs, but sometimes in rare situations for smaller children, there are costs. Like, for example, I did OT-PT with my son at Kaiser because we have Kaiser. And so, yeah, I paid a little bit for co-pays and things like that, but he also got OT and PT in the school. So, again, it's good to get it on both sides, especially when they're young because you want to get them to catch up. But yeah, that has nothing to do with the school, really. And just remember, the school district will pay for all of these specialized services in the classroom and even the pullouts, okay? But again, it really has to do with that specific student because students can get more than one service. They get one or multiple different things. Special ed services, we talked about. Special ed teachers, very specifically trained teachers, rock stars, right? Okay. Now, again, I put this infographic in here for those of you who are interested in becoming a special ed teacher. There's a lot more in here, and I know it's a little fuzzy, but it has a lot of benefits here, and it talks about salaries. It also talks about it is a high need. Look at this one. California and Utah, Massachusetts, high need. Okay, this tells you about how to do it in New York, but it's very similar to here. Okay, and again, that's my advocacy for being a special ed teacher. My sister is a special ed teacher. It's very, very difficult, and she's a saint with angel wings, and she's been doing it for about 10 years, and the average burnout time is like 3. So she works with Mod Severe, and it's culturally very, very diverse, and they wouldn't be who they were without her. It's amazing. Okay. And again, let me go back. Again, that talks about the teachers. Now, here, I also give a couple of little tips here on what every special educator should make some promises to parents like this. I promise to stop using what is he or she going to get out of this, or they're not ready, or I promise to always be accommodating, okay? I promise to never use the R word. We've talked about that, okay? So you guys can go ahead and read through that. It's so cute. And then presuming competence. I think to me this is the number one, besides compassion and empathy for kids. But assuming that the student can actually do it is the number one factor here. If you believe that all students have the ability and the right to learn, keep these in mind. Again, be sure that the annual goals on the IEPs reflect content standards, meaning push them towards a gen ed curriculum because they can do it. Use age-appropriate vocabulary. Speak to the students. Just treat them with dignity because they are humans, okay? Again, related services are all the different things that we can provide. And the providers. Now, this chapter I didn't think spoke enough about the different roles. But let me see what the book, again, to me, I want to take a second to talk about paraprofessionals, and I think that they're super, super important. But there's also team members like SLP, again, OT, speech, therapy, counselor, things like that. Paraprofessionals will be in the classroom. Now, there's 2 types. There is, we say para, just it's easier to say, but keep calm and ask a para. Sometimes the paraprofessional knows the child better than the teacher. And, sometimes it's just because they're right next to them all day, okay? The next one is a higher trained level, like an intervention specialist or a BI, a behavior intervention specialist. And so this is you're going to have for the higher behavioral child, and we'll talk more about behavior in a second. But if you want to work with autistic children, even in the home or the classroom, you're going to be considered a BI, a behavioral interventionist. Okay. Now, special settings. we talk more about, let's see, um, again, it could be different classrooms. It could be in the classroom. It could be in the school. It could be out of the school. Again, most students, again, for full inclusion, should be with their typically developed peers, okay? So 60%, most students are included in gen ed classroom at least 80% of the day, which I think is fantastic. Because remember, students like this were not even allowed in the school. So again, that number is increasing, which is so great. And again, some resources are offered, but it's depend on the needs, not their disability. They don't round up, okay, all the Aspies. Remember, we don't say that. We don't even say something about their disability. We would say their person first language, right? We don't like group them all up and be like, okay, right? We don't get all the English language learners in the cafeteria, right? We don't do that because they're not the same, okay? Some school districts have more resources, some have less, and so sometimes you'll see a little bit of difference there. But again, there's some student needs here, out-of-class supports, in-class supports, and specialized placements. Again, this is going to be gen ed classroom is going to be here, and then all the way down to maybe going to a different location, different school, depending again what the student needs. Okay, again, they were concerned about my son's behavior, and they said, well, this other school has all the tools he needs. Again, in least restrictive environment, you bring the tools to the child, not the child to the tools. Fantastic. I met with the district, and they agreed. So again, it's really, really hard to be empowered as a parent, but we got to push for it and spread the information, spread the word. Okay. Again, pull out program out of the classroom, and you could be pushing inside the classroom. And sometimes there's a resource room that's just kind of like home base or like a quiet setting or home room for these kids, and they might need it or they might not. Segregated or self-contained settings, that's usually a special educated class. So they might have recess and lunch with everybody else, but again, they have their own classroom. Okay. Now, community-based learning is a huge piece here. Some kids as they get older, some students as they get older, it's not as important for them to learn long division because they're going to go to college. Maybe their goal is not college. Maybe a functional goal for them is, doing like a transitional plan. We'll talk about that. And working in the community, having a job, living independently or with as much independence as possible. And we'll talk about how to include older students into their own goal setting. But community-based learning is ordering a hamburger, waiting for your change, counting the change back, opening the door, saying please, saying thank you, tying a shoe, budgeting money, writing a check, having a bank account. I know some people can't, I know some typical adults who can't pull that off, who can't balance that. So again, vocational skills or life skills in the environment in which it occurs, right? You can't like pretend to ride a bus if you're in the classroom. So this teacher will take them out on the bus. And so this next piece right here is super cute, and I will have us watch the whole thing. You might recognize Soul Pancake from Kid President, same company that produces Kid President. I also saw math in there. Besides money, you'll see they did fractions or using a knife properly. Again, those are life skills. Again, sometimes kids really just need a basic set of instructions, and this is so awesome. So awesome. Look how happy they are. Getting the feels. So great. So great. Let's see. And even taking a compliment, giving a compliment. So great. So sweet. So sweet. So sweet. It's giving me the feels, but I do have some eye makeup on too, so. Do you love it? Sorry, again, gives me the feels, but I'm going to chalk that up to 50% feels and 50% makeup. Again, what can we do for our students that is really applicable to them? I mean, is long division going to be that important to those guys? Is feeling like they're contributing to society and actually acting like other kids, is that going to be important to them? Uh-huh, right? Love that. Okay. And we'll look at another teacher's example in a sec, and it's going to be your journal assignment as well. So I want to make sure super awesome. Okay. Now, for highly effective teachers, again, compassion, passion, dedication, that kind of thing. It's a lot even more with special needs teachers. Okay. I'm hoping to do an interview with my sister. She sometimes doesn't want to talk about her job because she is really kind of stressed out. But yeah, I really think that it takes a special person because I don't have my credential. I'm not doing that. So it takes a special person to do that. Okay. So think about it. Gen Ed teachers know, again, if you're like if you're like maybe K through 5 or 6, then you're like multi-subject, right? But sometimes you can go single subject and be like in the middle school or high school. But special ed teachers have to know everything about everything, right? Just like the gen ed teachers. But then they also have to know about special needs and maybe sensory issues and making things different and accommodating. And it's like RTI on steroids. So it takes a special person. And, maybe in my next life, right? But again, it's hard. A lot of paperwork too. And again, who is responsible? Not just them, not just the parents. It's all of us. Especially, remember when we're doing our PBIS and everybody's walking around the school? Every parent and every teacher and every volunteer and every classified or staff member has a stake in how well these kids do. Again, the sociological perspective on disabilities is how well do we treat people with disabilities? How does our society consider treatment of people with disabilities? And how do you consider that? And who can you be an advocate for? And so we'll talk about that again. And I also want to say, that proverb that we've all heard, it takes a village to raise a child. I don't even think that even does the trick anymore. It's not even a village to raise a child. It's almost like a hive brain. We really need to step it up even more. It's not just a proverb. It's a truth. It's a reality. And it's not, again, not just for them and not just for a parent. It's for all of us. They're part of our society. It's not them. It's all of us. And again, if you've had an issue of neurodiversity in your life, then you understand how people need help. So again, don't look there, look around, okay? And again, partnerships and connections are key. Special ed teachers sometimes are misunderstood, or they think, you guys just play all day, or you guys just do worksheets all day, or whatever. Oh no, there's a lot more there. Plus you have parents like me to deal with. Yeah, I am a nightmare. I'm pretty aware of that, okay? So IDEA outlines what is a highly qualified teacher. Again, there's a lot to do with it, but I thought this was cute. Special ed teachers do it in the least restrictive environment, right? Like they say nurses do it with patients, and it's just funny. And it takes a special kind of person to care for a child with special needs. No, no, no. A child with special needs will inspire you to be a special kind of person. And I tell you what, personally, I was not as comfortable with children when I was coming up, and I've always had experience with children, but I was always like, oh, well, I had a hard childhood, so I'm wondering if that child is feeling really isolated and that whole thing. I felt uncomfortable with them, and I was really just projecting my stuff on there, but then I realized the universe aligns in a way that it pushes you to be a special person. And again, I'm not saying that I do everything right, because I certainly don't. I have off days, and there's been times like yesterday when I found out my son was like destroying furniture because he's just curious about it. Yeah, I yelled, and it's not who I want to be, but overall, he really has pushed me to be a better person. And being a mom has made me a better therapist, and being a therapist has made me a better mom. So I look at it as I'm very, very blessed to have be able to have the opportunity to work in this system. And again, I have limits. I'm not a special ed teacher, but I am an ABA therapist and a supervisor, and I'm also your professor. So I'm being honest with my skill set and putting it exactly where it needs to go. So, but those kids really pull the best out of you. Sometimes the worst. I'm not gonna lie, but I couldn't imagine my world without him or this community. It's the best of all of us. Yeah. Now I think this is cute. Special ed teachers, determination, excuses, hard work, passion, fun. Cute. I think this is blood, sweat, and tears. I love it. So cute. Serving size, one multitasking genius. And this one too, special ed teacher, only because full-time multitasking ninja is not an actual job title. It also could say mom up here, right? For those of you who know what I'm talking about. Now this is going to be your journal assignment, so I'm not going to have you watch this. You may have even seen it on Facebook. It's this nice young teacher who really decided to flip the script in his classroom, and with the parents' permission, he just wanted to make a difference, and it really has shown what treating students with dignity and individuality makes a difference. And I like here in this picture, he's got like these little pockets with money. Yeah, nice. So great. So great. And again, if it's on your heart to be a teacher, I will encourage you all the way. I'll be your biggest fan. But again, if it's not for you, that's great too. There's other things that you can do with the special needs community. You can, we'll talk about helping, you could help with ASL. You can help students who are intervening in the environment because they can't hear or see. So things like that. There's OT, SLP, PT, therapy, a psychologist. There's so many things you can do. You could be a collaborative teacher. You could be, just a gen ed teacher with a bunch of the kids in your class for full inclusion. That's how it's going to be. If you're going to get your credential, that's how it works. And trust me, my friends tell me all the time, I didn't go to school for special ed, but I have 4 kids in my class. And I have to manage them constantly. Yeah, it's called your job, and it's called full inclusion. Sorry, or not sorry, right? That's how it works. So related services providers, that talks more about who else can be on the team, again. And there's special responsibilities. Again, we need to, do a good job because they deserve the dignity and that it is the law. Okay, and then we'll talk about how students can actually participate in their own. And I wish this little section was kind of broken into 2. Now this is our chart here on page 93. It talks about the different related service providers. Now I couldn't get too crazy in here because when I take a picture it kind of does weird stuff, but again, you can get speech and language therapy, all social work. You might have to have social work, OT, health services, counseling, adaptive PE, physical therapy, educational interpreting. Yeah. Audiology services, orientation and mobility. This is, again, for kids who need canes and are in wheelchairs. There's somebody who actually teaches them how to maneuver. It's like teaching somebody how to walk. And assistive technology, and we'll talk about that too. When we get there, we'll talk about some kids need an iPad in order to communicate. Right? I have some really cool videos coming up too. And again, to inform parents about rights, every school district has to do it. It is by law. And I tell you what, this whole bag, I'm going to show you. This is my son's paperwork. This is my son's paperwork. This is not schoolwork. This is IEPs. This is rights and responsibilities. He is 9. There is one portfolio of work of his. But he's 9 years old, and this is about it. I mean, like, I'm going to have an entire file cabinet just for this stuff. And again, every single meeting starts off with parents' rights and responsibilities, and it is crazy because I'm the mom who, like, keeps everything, and I usually date the rights and responsibilities. And so I can tell you if that has changed. They hand you this packet and says, well, here's your rights and responsibilities. It could change, but it also outlines the fact that parents have the right to call an IEP whenever they want. And I mean whenever they want. I could have finished an IEP yesterday and I can call another one. Yeah, again, this is crazy. This is like all his, this is his triennial. I'll show you guys what all this stuff looks like. In fact, I'll hold some of the things up. And again, having a kid with all these different super fun things, but look I also have his awards, certificate of achievement for building character and filling buckets. So again, this was a good teacher. This was his 1st grade teacher. 2nd grade teacher didn't give him any awards. It's not like you need to give him an extra award, but if he worked hard and he did something super awesome, then you need to reward that. I have all his infractions, all his write-up, all his discipline, everything. Every suspension, every assessment, every test that they've asked me, because they'll ask parents, oh, okay, well, let's have the teacher fill out the Vanderbilt and let's have the parent fill out the Vanderbilt, because sometimes parents are exaggerating or they're totally clueless, right? So this is what one of the parental rights looks like. And again, You get this at every meeting, okay? And it tells you who it's from. Look at all this. Definitions, consent, protections, IEP meetings, children with disabilities, they can participate in their plan when they get older, all this legally stuff. Look at this. This is all legal stuff, right? And I mean, I'm telling you, this is crazy. So put that there. I'm telling you, that is cray cray. But that's only a part of it, you know. There could be more, could be less, but that's part of the deal. You know, parents have to kind of deal with this stuff, and it's not easy, not at all. Again, I struggle sometimes, and I'm technically an expert, okay? So at the IEP table, you're going to see all these different people, okay? Peyton's not really invited right now because he kind of gets self-conscious, and he's really not old enough at 9. But usually, and we'll talk about the age of majority. Okay, parents, obviously, you have to have a parent, or else you cannot hold a meeting. Gen Ed teacher usually comes in and gives like a thumbs up, says, hey, this is what's going on, this is what I think we need help on, and then they kind of bail because they're busy. Specialists, I tell you right, I have administrators and related services. He has an SLP. He used to get OT, although he still should probably get it. And PT, he should probably still get it because of his sensory issues. But we have a principal or a district administrator. There's a psychologist there, there's the school counselor, there's the therapist who is a specialist, there's his speech, and it's not that he can't speak, he's getting it for pragmatics, and we'll talk more about that. That is having an exchange of conversation and looking in somebody's eyes and being appropriate and staying on topic. We've been working on that one goal since kindergarten, and it's barely there. So every once in a while, especially if my husband's there and my attorney's there, there are 9 people around a table. 9 people around a table for a kid. And my favorite part is when they're all scratching their head like, how do we help this kid? I was like, well, wait a minute. There's 9 of us. Can't we figure it out? And by the way, the only person there without a master's degree or higher is like 1 person. Like everybody there has a master's degree or higher. I've been really fortunate with his really good teachers who actually are there. Have a high level of education. The good ones, yeah. So again, this related services providers really kind of depends on what that kid needs. You know, if they don't need help holding a pencil, and by the way, I was on campus last week and I still saw 4th graders holding pencils like this. 4th graders, or holding them like, or doing some, yeah, holding it like this, or some like thing like this, a 4th grader. I also saw a lot of speech impediments, which is okay, or delays. Do they talk like this still as 4th graders? I'm trusting those parents are allowing for support services like speech therapy. I don't know. But again, a lot of kids need a lot of help. So again, whoever is outlined in the IEP based on those assessments and based on that student's needs is who's going to help. Okay. Now, I wish, again, this little thing was kind of broken into 2 things. I think we talk about families and roles, but then we also talk about the students coming on in. Okay. Family members are part of the deal, right? We talked about this culturally, but as students get older, they can actively participate. Okay. Now, this is a really great video coming up right here. Again, we have this, and if this changes, if the district decides to change this entire form, they will mail it to me, every single parent who has got a special needs kid. But I want to this is not part of our chapter, but I found it's really good. Parents' rights in special education is great. I have to say this video is pretty good because the book is talking more to teachers. And again, I'm a parent, so I'm going to really advocate for parents. But again, if I didn't mention this before, you didn't see this, this is a huge, I'm going to definitely say, get this book. Okay, my attorney turned me on to this, and it's kind of like a workbook, and it's really nice. Rights Law is also a website, and I've included this in here as well. But again, it was the first time it helped me formalize all my frustration and what are my goals for my child, and maybe I'm pushing too hard, or maybe I need to understand more, and maybe I need to listen more. So it was good. It empowered me, but it also made me take a step back and really just take one day at a time. Okay, so Wright's Law is a workbook too. Go on the website; it's fantastic. I think they have an entire PDF of this entire book for free. You can download the whole thing. It's just massive. But the parents' rights in special ed, and I think this is really cute because, even if there's a dispute, they say it, they talk nicely to each other, which I'm not saying that I don't, but I've heard some instances where it's been pretty adversarial. So again, share this video link with anybody who you think needs it, please. Good. Talking about her strengths. Very good. Uh-huh. It's all got to be in writing, all of it. And trust me, they'll text me some changes. I'm not kidding. I got changes of place. We're going to put him in a new school starting in the fall. It was 2 days before the last day of school. I said, texting me a change of placement is inappropriate and illegal. So we can call an IEP on the last day of school, or you guys can do a stay put. And we'll talk about that as well. I'm telling you, sometimes they'll try to pull stuff over on parents, even though they know I know. They know I know. And the fact that they're trying to pull stuff is hilarious, right? But think of all the parents who don't know this stuff, right? Take 207. I'm telling you, I'm so tired of parents getting hosed. So again, watch that entire video. It's so fantastic, and share it. Now, tips for families. First of all, what they didn't put in here is that you can invite anybody to an IEP, another family member, somebody else who's going to translate, a family member who's a paralegal, an attorney. You do have to give them notice. You can't go in fighting, or else it's going to be a big fight. Right? I chose my attorney because she's not adversarial. And quote unquote, she said, I am not a junkyard dog. So if you want that, go find somebody else. I'm not here to sue them. I'm not here to take them to due process. So that helps me calm down a little bit, because parts of me wants to go for the throat, and I understand, but that's not helpful. Not helpful. It's not going to help. Not at all. I don't think that's the best way to behave. So again, for parents, if you don't understand, ask questions. So many parents just sit there and get hosed, and I get so upset. By the way, they will provide translation services. That is law by law. They cannot ask you, oh, do you have a family member who can translate? Especially a younger child. Inappropriate. Okay. And again, culturally, I know that some of our parents don't want to ask questions. They want to be very respectful, and they don't want to rock the boat. But that's not what's going to help your child. And I'm not saying rock the boat. I'm saying just ask questions. Say, I'm not sure what that acronym means, or I'm not sure what that word means, and can you tell me more about that? And it's okay to have an IEP in 2 parts. because sometimes our IEPs are 3.5 hours, and we have them in part 1 and part 2. And that's just how it works, okay? So due process just means that's like the legal proceedings on if there's some sort of dispute. And it can get kind of messy. Some school districts will double down, meaning they will hire massive lawyers and shut you down immediately. I know certain districts that's their way. They're just like, well, we're just going to get a bunch of huge lawyers. We're going to intimidate them, and they're not going to get what they want. Other districts will cave immediately, and say, oh, well, they took us to due process. You go ahead and give them whatever they want, so we don't have to go to due process. It just depends on what's going on and different factors, the teacher, the administrators, the district, cultural issues, things like that. So there's a lot of different things. And so, again, be on the same team with the teacher. You might get some inside information there, okay? Do your research and empower yourself. If you're not sure, ask me how. A child gets to the age of majority, which in some states is 16, and in California it's 18. So the year before the majority is met, basically you start talking about transition. Well, do you want to go to college? Do you not want to go to college? Do you want to make your own app business? Do you want to be a gamer? Do you want to just have a job and a girlfriend or whatever? I don't know, right? So again, inviting that student in so we're not just talking about them and making decisions about them without them making decisions. And sometimes it's a smooth transition and sometimes it's not. But again, any family member can be invited, and in some cultures that's really important. But some of the tips for students is talk about your strengths, talk about your goals. What do you want? And again, sometimes they say, yeah, I want to be a professional gamer. Well, first of all, some people are that. That is a career now, which is funky. But number two, if they need to work on their social skills, maybe that's something that we could do as a hobby, and then have other options. And there's other agencies that work with transition, like Easter Seals and things like that. The districts sometimes have contracted support providers for that. And again, any sort of help that student might need for that transition should be looked at and provided as much as possible. Now when the student's invited, you want to have them really guide those goals, and again, help them understand it, encourage them, and prepare them, and really help them help themselves, right? That's the point, because you don't want to have them, you don't want to be tying their shoe till they're 30, right? And again, student-directed IEPs are associated with higher academic achievement, better communication, better self-advocacy, and stronger motivation for students with disabilities. They're happier. What if this young man, when he said, I want to play violin, and somebody said, no, you can't do it, it's too hard? I've met people who call me and say, can you be my advocate? Because I said I wanted to take American Sign Language at the community college, and they told me it was too hard for me. My transition coach told me it was too hard for me. I was like, really? She's like, I already do a lot of signing anyway. Why would that be too hard for me? She's advocating for herself at 20 years old, and she's already been in college for a couple semesters, right? So again, helping a student help themselves is really the key here. Okay. And that was the people, the personnel involved. Now the plans. Now this kind of gets a little overlappy here. I'm not going to lie. The IFSPs and the IEPs and who does what and what's included and where. Just remember the IFSP is an individual family service plan. Again, that has to do with like when a child's younger, the family, like where are they going to live, where are they going to go to school, what's their health care provider. It's looking at the whole thing. And then the IEPs move into the students. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not, well, it technically is 3 to 21. Okay. And in some places it's 6 to 21, but usually IEPs start at the end of preschool. Okay. IEPs really look at that educational piece, where preschool is more of a social piece. A lot of learning, but it is a social foundation. Again. And when it's an IFSP, it has a case manager. Sometimes it's through the district or through a different agency. But when it's an IEP, there's sometimes a case manager or a special ed coordinator. It kind of depends on the roles in the district. Okay. Now, this is a little bit of a combination of what you can find on the bottom of page 97. It's really straightforward. And again, make sure you know the difference between IEP and IFSP. Okay. Now, at the very least, the IEP should include, how is this child doing, right? Have they met some certain standards here, certain standards here? So for my son, he's like at or above in math and reading. But when it, the report card is like math, reading, science, social studies, blah, blah, blah. You flip it over and it's all behavior. And it's like, right? So they'll say like, he's an excellent reader. He's very social. He's a sweet young man. However, right? So the strengths are always in there. And then goals. The goals are always to participate in general education curriculum. Okay, because the curriculum is supposed to set a student up for future success. Really, it's like, let's get them on track so they can be on track, right? Again, if you have issues at home, an IEP is not going to cover issues at home. All the accommodations and modifications and support services and planning and all that has to do with the classroom, not at home. So if you have a kid who's doing great at school and the parents say, you need to evaluate him for special needs because he doesn't listen at home, they're like, he listens great at school. Right? So again, it's usually opposite, where the school picks up on the need of the student and then takes it home, and the parents are like, what do you mean? Well, because the parents aren't reading with the student, or the parent isn't doing math with the student, so they don't see that struggle. Okay? So participations with students without disabilities, that's a nice way of saying least restrictive environment. Participation in those tests. I could sit on the fence with that. Talk to you about that later. When or how long the services will be implemented. You'll see the student will receive counseling services, a 30-minute session times 12 weeks, starting at this date, or speech services, a 15-minute pull-in session in a group format for once a week times, yeah, it's really interesting. They have these little formulas. And quite frankly, I've never seen too much of those things. So they always try to scale those down. So it's, again, based on need. So I get empower parents to ask for as much as the student needs, not wants, needs. Transitions, we talked about that, age of majority, and measuring progress. How will progress be monitored? I get these lovely, let's see, do I have them? These lovely, report card. They're like a daily report card situation. Looks like this. And this one was a give me a call from the teacher, but the hi Mrs. Laney, give me a call. He had some vocal distractions, things like that. So we have these goals and how he's met them and scored them. So we get this once a day. So we get one of these once a day. Now we're still in transition with this too, because it's not, these goals are kind of vague for him. He needs something a little bit more specific, but I can expect one of those home a day. And again, it tells us the percentage of our goal has been met. It was 53% of the goal has been met. He hit his goals once or twice in a year. So that's how you know that that tool is not very effective. A child should be hitting those numbers should be going up, and maybe up and down, but always going up. And we're not looking for perfection, but we're looking for an approximation of goals, like 80% would be great. 50% not great. So we get one of those every day. Sometimes we get emails from Class Dojo. It's an app. And sometimes there's a video that she shares. Sometimes there's an Atta-girl or an Atta-boy. And yeah, Class Dojo looks like this. Let's see. Well, I don't want to show you kids' pictures, but Class Dojo is kind of like, oh yeah, they're talking about, today they were learning about some geography. And so we can get messages on this. We can get some behaviors on this. It kind of depends. She said she'll also kind of mark if the student wants to do escape behaviors. Like if it's math and I have to go to the potty every time there's math. So things like that. It just gives us some more information for that student. Okay. And there's a bunch of different apps. It doesn't have to be Class Dojo, but it's kind of cool. There's also a thing called, I think it's Papyrus or Haiku, and it's very close to Blackboard, and it's very similar to Blackboard. So again, it's up to the teacher, whatever you guys agree in terms of parent communication. Now again, the IEP is developed for that specific child, but again, there's minimum procedures in which that needs to, get implemented again. But are there basic elements? Yes, again, and remember these are working documents. And again, I put that process down here because once we get in here, we're always in this process, right? And so it's a working document, meaning that it can change all the time. You can do amendments. It just has to be approved, signed, copies. It's a legal document. This is a legal document sanctioned by the federal government. You do not mess around with this. If the school is not providing per minutes, if they didn't do their 15-minute of speech therapy today, they owe that student 15 minutes of speech therapy. That's how it works. It is a contract. Could you imagine like having your contract of your apartment, your condo, or your house or whatever just violated all the time? No, it's against the law. Okay, so this is the chart that showed up on page 99. I couldn't get a better graphic for this, but again, the IEP really outlines all these different things besides those identifiers of that student. What are their strengths and things like that. But again, goals and assessments and related services and accommodations, all those things, right? It's like this is like the template here, okay? And I did here put the IEP goal formula. It's kind of hard to see. It gets a little bit fuzzy, but in my class that I teach, this class in the typical environment, I make them write IEP goals, right? That's something I make them do in class. So I might incorporate that in here, I might not, but again, the goals are not always easy to write, but at the same time, that's what we're doing. That's the super important part, okay? Now again, IDEA guarantees FAPE and LRE, right? And here's the deal. There's more things to support a child. Maybe a child is still not doing well with all these supports and people and IEPs and goals and things like that. Sometimes it's behavioral. Yeah, sometimes it happens. But I'm a big fan of this, functional behavioral assessment, meaning what is your behavior doing and what is it doing for you? So if a child gets up to go potty all the time every time there's math, we call that escape. Okay, these are the 4 functions of behavior. This is not misspelled. It's Canadian or European. And it's the same for everybody, even typically developed people. S-E-A-T, take a seat. Sensory, sometimes you'll see a kid do this. Well, that creates a sensory, it's like a hug for them, or they just like it. They'll do whatever. You know, you'll get some kids who line toys up in a line, or you'll get kids who do this, because it creates a sensory input for them. So that function of that behavior is sensory, okay? Escape, I have to go potty. Oh, really? Is this because it's math? Right? They're escaping. So once we identify why they're doing something, we can kind of get to the bottom of it. So what about math? Maybe they have a specific learning disability in math, but they've been hiding it. Okay, maybe they forgot their math homework. Maybe they forgot their folder. Maybe the desk mates are bullying them regarding math. Maybe it could be a billion different things, right? But once we get to the bottom of it, we could actually work on it, right? Otherwise, they're just going to be going to the bathroom all the time, and they'll figure out, when I grow up to be an adult, I'll just run away from stuff, and then I'll just ignore it. Oh, that doesn't ever work, does it? Attention is another one. Hi, look at me, look at me, look at me. Barking like my son does, talking all the time. Again, it's just really just, I want to control the room. I want to control the conversation. And so if we know, maybe they're feeling left out, maybe they're feeling scared, sad, or whatever, let's get to the bottom of it. And then you'll see those behaviors lessen, okay? And then tangibles. That's pretty much your typical temper tantrum. I want an Oompa Loompa now. I want a tablet now. I want everything right now. And the kid hits the deck and starts having this big temper tantrum. Well, if we know they're acting in this crazy way to get something, and by the way, we all know typical adults who act this way to get their way, right? If they act away just to get something, well, maybe we have to figure out something more functional in between this weird behavior and access. So maybe it's not, no, you can't have this. It's, yes, you can have this when you act in a certain way. So maybe it's a reward chart, or maybe it's catch you doing good, or maybe it's those kinds of things. So 4 functions of behaviors works for everybody. And in my class, I bring my son in and I make people take data. So if you're going to work in a classroom or in somebody's home with a child on the spectrum, you have to take data. Sometimes I'm just like boom, 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 and say, well, 80% of the day was attention seeking, 10% of the day was escape, and 5% of the day was sensory, right? This is funny. It's all fun and games, so someone figures out the function of your behavior, right? How about this? You might ask a family member or loved one, can you take out the trash? And they basically pout, have a big temper tantrum, make some really passive-aggressive comments. It's because they don't want to do it, right? So then you can work on like, wow, taking out the trash is how we support our family and keeping our house clean, right? You can kind of get to the bottom of it, right? I found out that that kind of happens in my house because that person was never required to do chores and had a cleaning lady growing up. See, I didn't have that. So now when I ask certain people to do chores, there's a backlash because the answer is they don't know how to do it. And so they don't want to look like they're not smart with chores. It's hilarious. The functions of behavior work with everybody, right? Behavior. Oh, by the way, access to tangibles. Let's go back. How about your paycheck? I'm going to work so I can pay my mortgage or my rent and I pay my car payment and then I can buy a hot new phone. When's the last time you went to work and didn't get a paycheck? Would you keep working there? I don't think so. So again, all of us work on access to tangibles, access to dollars, okay? Now, the manifestation determination has to do with when a child is so behaviorally out of whack. Is it because of their disability or is there something else, right? So again, you can't suspend a child if their behavior is a manifestation of their actual disability, right? It's crazy. Again, if you have a student with, let's say, a learning disability and they bring a gun to school, those things aren't work. But if you have a student who's emotionally disturbed and brings a gun to school, then you can look at different things. And again, there's a stay put provision, meaning like they're not automatically going to get thrown out. However, you have to make sure other students are safe as well. And you can put a child in a temporary placement for up to 45 days. Okay, let's see how we're doing on time. Got to get this out of here. Okay, good. I should wrap this up pretty quickly. Okay, in traditional planning, again, students have their input with transitional planning and make sure that they can put their goals in as well. Again, so those last two could have been split differently, but hey, that's when I write the book, it'll be different. Again, for our summary, we had individually determined education. Again, there's 7 steps in the IEP process. Make sure you know those. In terms of personnel, there's all kinds of different people who can help this IEP fly. And then it can happen in different settings, different environments. Again, it just depends on what the student's need is. And there's 4 plans that really help deliver the FAPE and LRE. Okay, make sure you know all of those. And in regards to the watch these videos, I put like one extra one in here, but the co-teaching is kind of cool. OT, the para, this is great. I want you guys to look at that. This will help with all of these things, okay? The IEP team and the FSP. This gives you a little bit snapshot on every single one, okay? Also some websites. Now here, yes, the book gives us these, but this is the one I'm suggesting. It wasn't listed in the chapter, but if you're interested in working in the autism community, this is like free training. Free training. Free training. If you go through these little training modules, which are really dry, really boring, but it gives you all the technical terms and prowess, and if you went and said, hey, I took a couple child development classes and I have this training, you're going to get a job immediately. And I think it's about $15 to work an hour to work in people's homes and working with kids. So it's a really good job. It's really rewarding. If you're considering trying it, go for it because it's not for everybody and then you can just move on, right? Agencies and organizations, Pacer Center, we've talked about that. There's all these different websites to empower parents and professionals. These are magazines like the professional journals. And again, this is our discussion board, okay? And I picked 2 again. One is, you can just choose a one out of these 2, but one is the pre-referral process, okay? And I put that in the discussion board. And the other one is related services. So again, if you are looking at SLP, OT, nursing, this might be more for you. So again, make sure that you put the post by Wednesday and answer your classmates by Friday. And last but not least, we have a quiz and dun dun dun. Exam 1. It's really just an extended version of a quiz. Don't freak out. I do reuse about 30% of the questions. I go back and figure out the ones that most of you missed, and then I try to revamp it and kind of put it in there in the exam as well. So I make sure everything is nice and even. There's not all questions about, chapter 3 versus nothing from chapter 1. I make an even amount. It will be true, false, multiple choice. The fill-in is going to be your acronyms, so I'm going to give you a heads up on that. And then there's going to be one essay, or it's a short essay, and then maybe another essay for extra credit. You will have 60 minutes to do it, and I think you guys should be good so far, because you've done the quizzes. It's just a longer quiz. But other than that, I think we are ready to go. This is Unit 1. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? So excited. So again, it's been my pleasure to bring us through all this, and I will see you in the virtual world.